am compelled by Schlock.
We are going to schlock into the Forbidden Zone, a 1982 cult classic. We're going to break it down by the good, the bad, and the schlock. What is up, everybody? I am Darby Ellis Lewis Wilson. This is Chris Anonymous, and we are going to talk about a very, very weird movie. Chris, have you seen this before? Did you know this thing existed?
I did not. I had some friends who were really into Oingo Boingo, so they might have told me about it at some point in time, but yeah, it was still totally new to me.
So, as you mentioned, Oingo Boingo, Danny Elfman. This is directed by his brother, Richard Elfman, who was also in Oingo Boingo, or the Mystic Knights of the Oingo Boingo.
Right. So that's how they start. Well, it's kind of like how Jefferson Airplane became Jefferson Starship and then became Starship, right? Bands evolve over time. Some members drop out and they kind of evolve into to their core thing that they become.
Okay. So I guess
think the Mystic Knights was the early iteration. And then a lot of the people left and Elfman continued on, and it was just Oingo Boingo. Okay. And, we had great hits like Weird Science and Stay.
They did Weird Science, whereas Mystic Knights of the Oingo Boingo, they were more of a performance troupe, I guess, and they did kind of these really theatrical performances, and that is like the brainchild of this movie.
It's essentially what you're getting is they wanted to capture on film the essence of the shows they were doing. That's what I gather.
Yeah. So the movie costs about $100,000 to create, according to the interweb. But apparently it broke Richard Elfman. So he had like mortgage his house and stuff. All of the actors, all but one actor, they like gave their paychecks back to finance the movie. I think they had some problems with music licensing. And getting the animation paid for and things like that. So really, like, this movie, he put everything that he had into it, and he used obviously kind of his friends, people that were excited to work on this. I have a funny picture. This is like a part that just cracks me up. It's this guy when Frenchie first goes into the Forbidden Zone. We're jumping ahead a little bit here, but it's such a funny picture. It's this guy that has like a mouse cut out on him, and it's like this mouse singing on his body, bing bing bam boom or something. Apparently this wasn't meant to be funny. The actor is just like a friend of his and totally froze up once the camera started rolling, and so they had to superimpose another mouth on him singing, and it is the funniest thing I've ever seen. Like, because he's doing all this tongue stuff, he's like boom 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 boom, and just with this deadpan stare. It's the
like
funniest
thing. deer in headlights stare.
Yeah. So clearly he was just pulling together what favors he could get to get this movie made, and I absolutely love that. There is kind of a lot to talk about in this movie. So I want to get into the web of schlock. I want to tell everybody sort of who all these people are. Where did they come from? Why are they here? Where did they go? Chris, what do you have for me?
So you already mentioned the director, Richard Elfman. A lot of the music was done by his brother, who also has a part in the movie.
May have heard of him.
Yep, as Danny Elfman. Frenchie is played by his then wife, Maria Pascale Elfman. I'm sure I'm butchering her name. Again, lots of friends and family.
We go. Old Danny is the devil.
Yep. And oh man, you could
Devil
just see
Danny.
his charisma even at this stage, like that
wow.
star presence. Like everyone I thought did a really good job. And there's some really great actors in this thing, but there's just a charisma and star presence with Danny Elfman that he's always had. That kind of manic energy behind his eyes.
The way he was dancing when they come in, like he is full of energy.
Yep.
So a side of him that I've never really seen because he's just the man behind the music. Right? Okay,
so I had a Oingo Boingo kick for a while, so I definitely saw this side of him. But yeah, a lot of people don't. Susan Tyrrell, who we have just watched last week, she had a really small role in Rockula. She played the queen in this. Just was such a screen presence as well. She was nominated for Academy Awards. She's been in lots of Schlock films. And just really interesting stuff. The other two things I want to talk about that are really interesting are the guy who played Squeeze. Squeeze It, and he also played his twin sister. Matthew Bright. This was his only acting thing, but he went on to write and direct. Did you ever see Freeway or Freeway 2 in the 90s?
I did
okay,
not.
So Freeway starred. We'll have to review it sometime. It's pretty schlocky, but in a good way. Reese Witherspoon and Kiefer Sutherland in like a modern kind of Bonnie and Clyde-ish version of Red Riding Hood.
None of that makes any sense to me.
Right?
Those words you strung together don't
coalesce. He's written a fair amount and directed a fair amount. So did a movie called Shrunken Heads, also directed by Richard Elfman. But the other people I want to mention are the Kipper brothers, and that's their stage name. It's Brian Ruth, I'm sure I'm butchering it, and Martin Van Hasselberg. And if we can pull up this picture of them as the boxers in this, as I'm watching this, I'm like, there's something like extremely familiar with this. And it hit me that they're one of my favorite parts in UHF. They're the two like twin looking guys that are like, whoa, 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 whoa,
yeah.
whoa, whoa, whoa. And it's just like this really, really bizarre, surreal thing. Go ahead.
I have a confession to make.
Yeah.
So these guys, they appeared a little bit earlier in the movie as well. I think they appear throughout the movie.
Yeah, they were in the classroom as well. Yep.
But they show them first. They're like in jock straps when they're first like talking about the Forbidden Zone. But I have a confession to make. These guys, when I'm alone and I'm in my weirdest mode, I do exactly what these guys do. I'm just like,
right? It's just
like there's some primal childishness to it that I love.
And they had their little act from the 70s on, and they appeared in several movies and specials. There was an HBO special, there's a Cinemax special. The not Brian, but the other one, Martin von Hasselberg, has been married to Bette Midler since 1984. So that's a fun little factoid.
Wow.
It's just that web of schlock that's like everything, like it's like, okay, it ties together here. And
that's the kind of guy Bette Midler goes for, huh?
That, yeah. Whoa, whoa, whoa. And I went after this movie and watched several of their little skits on YouTube, and I'm just like, man, this is amazing.
Yeah.
And like I said, they were like one of my favorite parts from UHF, and like just it's that thing like we were talking about with Rockula, where those little girls were creepy and made no sense to me, and then I realized that they were part of this scene and they were this act outside of the movie, and then it like makes so much more sense. And it's the same thing with these guys. I thought it was just some weird thing they threw into UHF, which it is. but it's also just these guys who had this shtick, and they're out performing and doing their craft, and they're in this movie, and they're amazing. They're one of my favorite parts.
Yeah, I think this is yet another very scene movie.
Yes. Yep. Yeah. Very much of the scene. So yeah, that's really all I have for Web of Schlock. I mean, you could do a deep dive with this. I mean, some people have went on to do insanely good things like Danny Elfman, and some have not done much else after this, and some have just kind of stayed in the realm of schlock, and that's not a bad thing. That's awesome.
Yeah. Well, so before we head on, remember, if you're watching this far, you might as well hit the like button. You might as well leave a comment and tell us what your favorite weird sound is, if it's or woo. And why don't you subscribe as well? Subscribe.
Subscribe.
See, they've unlocked it. They've unlocked it in me, and it's not going to go away now. And also be warned, we've already done some, but there are going to be spoilers ahead. So the good and the bad. Let's do it.
Let's power through these so we can get to the schlock, because that's what this movie is, and in every good way.
We've talked about the music. I mean, the music is pretty rad. Danny Elfman did a great job. The Knights of the Oingo Boingo, whoever they are. I thought it was kind of weird. Chris, did you watch the Danny Elfman masterclass?
I did, yeah.
So I thought that he had said in that Pee Wee Herman was his first like composing gig, but maybe that was just first composing gig by himself.
Maybe by himself, or maybe like as like a paid thing where there was a contract or something, like this. How much is this was a favor to his brother versus like an actual job? I mean, obviously he did score it, but yeah. Well,
so I think a big good for this movie, and I don't know really how to connect it, but it seems like this movie is probably pretty influential. So I see a lot of things in this movie. Obviously, it looks a lot like old cartoons. I mean, that's what this movie is. It's just a live action
R-rated cartoon.
R-rated cartoon. It reminds me of Crumb. R. Crumb. Is that his?
Yep.
Max
Felix the Cat. I mean, the 70s had a lot of R-rated cartoons.
But in it, I also see like Popeye, Altman's Popeye that came out. I think it came out the year that they started making this movie.
It came out in 80.
But like there's some sort of, there's got to be some sort of connection there, because they seem like they have some similarities in their weirdness there. Also, it just reminds me of like a pastel colored Marilyn Manson video in some ways. It reminds me of Rob Zombie.
Living Dead Girl
cartoon called the cartoon El Super Beasto.
El Super Beasto. It remind you at all of the video for Living Dead Girl?
A little bit, yeah. I mean, I see all of that in there, and even Pee Wee Herman, like we talked about, Danny Elfman, right? He's connected to Pee Wee Herman via Tim Burton, but we have a picture of Jambi, of the Queen, but doesn't that look like Jambi from Pee Wee Herman? Did they grab some of this stylistic humor and stylistic set design? So I think this movie was probably pretty influential in that underground scene.
It very well could have been. I'm not sure. The only other argument I have is that they would be pulling from the same material as opposed to one from the other. But I think it's probably the answer is a mixture of both.
Yeah, they're just all around each other.
Well, and that's kind of like artistic scenes, right? That like you feed off the energy of the other artists that you're creating with and that are in your group and that are in that scene, right? Be it music or art or film or literature or anything. So like it makes sense that like these groups of filmmakers together, you see things in their work that you would see from the other person's work, like they're rubbing off on each other.
Exactly. And the last good thing that I have is the family. Each one of them, is hilarious. They provide their own thing. We got Frenchie, we got Ma and Pa, and then we have Grandpa and Flash, who for me kind of still the show. I mean, they're kind of
Flash is so great.
And man, have you ever seen so much dry humping in your life?
Maybe at a dog park.
Maybe the AV club at junior prom or something.
Yeah, man, but
it is ridiculous. And so that maybe leads me a little bit into my bad, that I guess maybe you could argue that this movie is exploitative. People had a lot of problems with this movie. It was considered a midnight movie, right? You show it to people that are out late. Or it goes underground. I guess that's how the movie survived, was it just got passed on through bootleg copies. But people saw this movie and they felt like it was offensive because there is blackface in it, there's nudity in it, there's I guess what people saw as anti-Semitic remarks, anti-Christian remarks. But the thing is like once you get into that territory, like once you're nailing all those demographics, it's kind of like, well, that's what this is. This is a South Park.
I was just going to say, so South Park.
Yeah.
So you attacked everyone equally.
Yeah, they got everybody. And I mean, like the anti-Semitic stuff, I guess Richard Elfman, that like the biggest part there was like his Jewish grandfather. And he's like, no, we weren't doing a stereotype. That's just him. Like he just came and did this part for us. So I don't know. But as far as the blackface goes, so I guess there's like 3 versions of this movie. There was the original version, which was in black and white. And then it survived underground as a midnight movie and with bootleg copies. And then it got digitally recolored in 2008. And that's around the time that Richard Elfman got the rights back to the movie. I think he basically had to sell all the rights away in order to even get it put out. Like I said, a lot of financial problems around it. But it got digitally recovered and digitally recolored in 2008. He got rights back to it. And then people were like, whoa, there's a lot of blackface in this. We got to cut that out. And so then there's like a 2020 version, which is, I think, what we both saw, where they redo the clown's makeup. So it's white face, which I guess is okay. And then one of the imps, it's like, or devil people, it's green face rather than blackface. So very interesting that this movie is kind of like still being released today. It's rather current in some ways. But so those are the bads that a lot of people have for them. I'm on the fence about a lot of that stuff. It's just one of those things where like this movie was meant to be that way. So I don't know if I can say that it was bad because they meant to make it bad. They meant to make it offensive. But one of the main bads that I have would be at some point in the movie, I feel like all of the weirdness got a little dull because I'm settling into it and getting used to it, right? So it felt like maybe in the second half of the movie, it started to drag a little bit, just because I'm like, okay, everything's so weird. They didn't throw anything weird enough or new enough in the weird zone to like jump my attention back in until Danny Elfman came in, which is like who I was waiting for the entire movie.
They knew when to put him in. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. To pump it back up. So I don't know. Maybe that's not a bad. What do you have, Chris?
Okay. For good. The music, the animation, the sets, the runtime. I like that it's not an hour and a half. I like that it's an hour and 14 minutes.
Yeah.
And that's not to say that I didn't enjoy that hour and 14 minutes. I thoroughly did. But with this kind of, it's cartoony, it's avant-garde, it's absurdist. There's some silent film style in there. But the main thing is that it's part of that that surreal cinema, the surrealist kind of movie. And so that's my good. My bad is, yeah, there are some offensive things in here, and it's not for everyone. And so if it's not for you, don't watch it. They knew what they were doing, and I don't think they did anything without consciously choosing to do it. Right. So again, it's that idea of like, yes, that is offensive, but I'm doing that for the sake of this piece. So is it subversive or is it just stupid? And that's that everyone's got to decide that on their own, but
it's stupidly subversive.
There you go. And then the other bad I have, this is a bad, this is a good, and this is just kind of part of that whole surreal kind of idea. It's just watch us being weird, right? That's what this movie says. A bunch of people got together and said, hey, watch us being weird. And to me, with this film, it was compelling. I liked watching them being weird, but someone else could do almost the exact same thing and I would hate it. And I have no way to qualify that except for if you're just saying, hey, watch me being weird, then it better be some kind of entertaining weird. Right. And a lot of times
there's plenty of weird stuff to watch, but it's not necessarily fun to watch.
Yeah. So that's my bad. So I think we can just probably get into schlock.
Yeah, let's do it. I really want to pick your brain because we talked a little bit before the show that you are a lot more versed in surrealist cinema than I am, and so I'd like to hear some more about that. Like, where does this movie fit within that genre?
Well, I mean, it's a really broad genre because there's so many other genres around it, right? There's just absurdist film and the theater of the absurd, and then there's cartoons, and there's Monty Python, and there's oniric cinema, and there's just these weird little short films that are, I don't know, colors swirling, right? I mean, the thing with the surreal cinema is that it uses shocking imagery, absurd imagery, a lot of dreamscapes, a lot of Freudian symbolism, a lot of ancient symbolism. To me, it feels like allegory untethered. It's not attached to any concrete idea like a classic allegory would be, right? It's dreamlike, and you see. I mean, you can research this and go down a rabbit hole. There's so much cinema, a lot of it not feature length, a lot of it is feature length. But I'll just touch on a few that have influenced me over the last 20, 25 years of like really being into movies. The first one is Jean Cocteau's The Blood of the Poet, or The Blood of a Poet. It's maybe an hour, and it's this like dream sequence. And then there's this chimney falling, and there's this guy. And that's the first time, that mirror trick that you really liked in Bloody New Year.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
The old Texas switch.
The old Texas switch. Well, the first time I saw it, and this movie was from like 1935-ish, I want to say. So this is probably one of the first times they use it. That was in the Blood of a Poet. Just these beautiful, beautiful black and white images. Bizarre sets, props, lots of use of props, lots of use of camera tricks. Movies are dreams, right? And most movies nowadays that we watch are kind of like the dreams where you wake up and you're not sure if that really happened. Like it's like you're watching a story and it's like so realistic and nothing about it is super dreamlike except for that you woke up and realized it was a dream. And then you have the dreams that have no bearing on narrative and are just bizarre and off the wall, and they're going along fine, and then this thing happens.
All of a sudden there was a dancing frog.
Correct, there was a dancing frog. Then one of my favorite directors is Alejandro Jodorowsky. Fando y Lis is one of the first ones that I saw of his. It was Lost for a while. It was a 60s film, and it's basically shot in kind of like a rocky desert area that might be some country or some landscape, but it also could be like the underworld. And it's this person searching for another person, and they come across all these, there's a Pope-like figure, and they have a doll, and then there's a hole in the doll, and these snakes are crawling out of it, and just heavy overhanded symbology, right? Just dripping with symbolism of like this cup with a flower in it that I turn upside down and it flows away represents, who knows what it represents, right? It's just this rush, this overflowing onslaught of imagery that connects in the director's mind or doesn't connect, right? And then like there's a new wave Czech film called Daisies, and this is a little more where you start getting some narrative into it, but again, it's kind of like just following these two girls along as they go on these mini adventures and like break into places and kind of mess around with people, and then like have this giant food fight in this banquet hall. And like, again, the point of the film then was like, okay, let's go do this thing. And then you just watch them doing it. And it's just bizarre. Right. And it just has a dreamlike quality of like, this couldn't really happen, but it's happening. And then like in the 70s, you had a Japanese horror movie called House, not to be confused with the house we watched. And, you know, it's these schoolgirls that go to their aunt's house or grandma's house. I can't quite remember. And there's a demon there. And then all this crazy stuff happens. But like there's animation and there's like moments of soap opera and crazy music and, you know, looking at the camera and then like floods of blood. And like it's a horror movie, but it's so absurd and surreal and just dreamlike that it really, you know, it's very like hypnotizing in a way. And so that might be part of like the lulling and the boring part way through, is that you're getting lulled into this like state of like, okay, what bizarre things happening next? And there's no real narrative thread, or if there is, it's very secondary to what you're doing. So this fits in with that, but it also feels like Monty Python, right?
Yeah, definitely like the animation.
And just the episodic nature of it, where you could probably take out 2 or 3 sections and rearrange them and it wouldn't change the story.
Yeah. And I guess that's sort of originally how it was conceived. They were just going to do
right. And they tacked on.
Yeah. It was going to be like Monty Python.
Right. And again, like Looney Tunes or Pee-wee's Playhouse, there's just so many things that I see in it and so many stylistic tricks. Very just grab bag, throw whatever in. And again, that absurd, shocking, almost provocative choices and imagery is really part of that movement. And so again, it's kind of like, do you fault them for that, or they're doing what they're doing? And if that's not for you, don't watch it. Because it definitely isn't for everyone, but I thoroughly enjoyed it. Like I'm going to stop talking about about surrealistic cinema and let's go on to just some crazy stuff in this movie. Like when Squeeze-It's typing on the typewriter and then the chickens like convince him to go into the underworld to save his sister. Just such a bizarre thing, but you know, it just hit me just right and it made me chuckle.
Yeah, right. Well, talking about this surrealist cinema and into horror. So one of the reasons I like horror movies is because they're allowed to experiment a little bit more with camera angles and lighting and different things like that to create mood, right? But I guess if you go further back into the surrealist cinema, you can really experiment with sets. And that's something that I found really intriguing about this movie, was the set design, right? It looked like a play, like everything was drawn. But even we get like the dinner table scene where we have what I call the mandolier, is like the guy he's just like hanging down and he's holding the candles.
It's a great gag when he turns into a skeleton, isn't it?
Yeah, he like eventually dies, like the candles all burned down. But we look here, what a simple set.
Right.
It's just a white background, a long table. It might be a few tables pushed together and then the tablecloth goes over it. But it conveys so much, even though it's so simple.
Well, let's stay on this picture for a minute, because it conveys so much or so little, depending. And again, with that surreal kind of thing, they're sitting on dice, so that can represent something if you want it to. The table is black and white and it alternates. That can symbolize something if you want to. The guy as the chandelier holding the candles, right? That can represent something if you want it to, or it can just be this overall vibe.
Right.
And, again, this is very dreamlike, right? This is very like, okay, well, everything seemed realistic except for there was this thing and there it is. You have a frog and you have a small person running over, and it's this long table, and it's just bizarre.
Well, one of the big criticisms I saw when I was looking up this movie, I don't really find it a problem at all, but they say that the Forbidden Zone world is just as bizarre as the real world, like outside of the Forbidden Zone, and maybe that's a problem with the surrealist idea. So we have a picture of the teacher with the gun, like when they're going into the classroom, right? That is just a weird place. Like there's the like people gambling in the back, and they shoot one, and then the teacher's just like, all right.
Well, and then like
they get in a gunfight. It's
like satire that's not satire, that you don't know what's being satired. Like when they all put the paper bags over their heads and then take out their books to read. So obviously they can't read. Like that could mean something if you want it to, right?
And by the way, that's not Andy Dick that was in that picture. I'm like 99% positive.
Man, but dead ringer.
But like, it's just so weird. Above and below, right? The real world and the Forbidden Zone.
And again, I can see their complaint, but it's not really a complaint for me, because it just feels like this whole world is that. And as weird as the top world is, I think the sixth dimension is stranger. I mean, they go through the intestines and then land on poop pillows.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then they go to different doors and meet different people. It also feels like a love letter to like the stuff that they loved growing up.
Mm-hmm.
Like the Cab Calloway song and the dancing and the kind of that kind of swing music and big band and just, yeah.
And I think we're running out of time, but I do want to get to some of these other pictures that I think that you had, Chris.
Yeah, let's go. What do we got? The prologue, I think, was great because it really sets up the tone for the film. And it's such a like fun, cartoony, like play theater kind of set.
Mm-hmm. The crooked house, like it's Betty Boop, right?
Yep, exactly. And then Huckleberry P. Jones, Local Pimp, Narcotics Peddler, Slumlord. Like it just really is so over the top and out there that it really sets the tone for the movie, and I love that. We got to the dancing frog. The father, the daddy, when he rockets out to the earth, and it's this great animation sequence. I mean, again, it looks
like a filter. Like what we would have today, just a filter put onto them. But
it's just so great, the cutout animation and how they made everything. And again, it's taken to that absurd extreme, right? Of like, sure, he could just blast off and we show up for a second, but it just stays on it and it gets more cartoony and more animated and just out there. And again, if this is the kind of movie or film you're making, then staying on those shots and going all the way and taking it there, that's what you want to do.
Exactly.
Again, you didn't know what you were getting in for. This dancing was great. And he has a giant frog head.
Yeah, it's a dream.
It's a dream.
Did you know that there is a Forbidden Zone 2 that Richard Elfman has been trying to put in production, I think since like 2009.
I did not know that. I hope he gets it made. That would be amazing.
Well, he tried or succeeded in kickstarting it, or no, I think it was on Indiegogo maybe. Tried crowdfunding it in 2014. I don't know if they succeeded or not because it's not out, but you can like go onto YouTube and find like little snippets and things of him like in clown makeup and it being weird. So there potentially will be a sequel, but did you know that we have already been in our show been to a forbidden zone.
Yeah, yes, with Space Hunters, the subtitles in the Forbidden Zone, right?
The Forbidden Zone, yep. So make sure you guys check that out. I think we're wrapping up. Chris, we have a special thing that we're going to do coming up in the near future. Tell us what it is.
So not this Monday, but next Monday. So in 2 weeks, we'll be doing a double feature where we review Dungeons and Dragons and
2000
Dungeons and Dragons.
Honor Amongst Thieves.
Right. So we'll be watching the one that just came out and the one from 2000, and we'll compare and contrast, see how they stack up. But until then, that is Darby Ellis Lewis Wilson.
That's Chris Anonymous. We gotta give a big thank you to S. Michael Sims.
Oh yeah, for our last movie. Yeah, thanks for recommending this movie, man. Yeah.
All right, we will see you all in 2 weeks. Bye.
Schlock.